From the creators of the Big Moon Energy Drink comes a bunch more content no one asked for. Patreon.com/SinclairLore.
Okay, we'll start. It's 1 hour, 58 minutes, 40 seconds. We'll see if we can get a new intro done. Try to make it like 2 and a bit hours. Okay. In this very special episode of Gaming in the Yeltsin Years, we are discussing the 1998 game Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver. And we are discussing it with a special guest, Autumn, who you may know from Twitter and from Discord. Autumn, can you introduce yourself?
I am Autumn. As Richard mentioned, I'm mostly active on Twitter and Discord. I make video games with my partner Tiffany. We go by Girl Software, which is definitely inspired from Software, and that is girlsoft.com. Also, girlsoftware.com, Tiff corrects me from the other room. And just a little bit of a flex, but I have been listening to Sin's videos since before Richie was here.
Ooh.
Oh my god! I love you so much, Autumn. Oh, and Autumn, can you tell us what your Twitter is?
Oh, my Twitter is @Cisbane. It's @CISBANE.
Do you want to, like, mention any of the... Because you've got, like, an itch store for the Girlsoft games. Do you want to, like, mention any of those specifically, or...?
Oh, yeah. You can find, like, our game Jessica and Lacrima, which are two of my favorites on itch. Jessica is also on Steam. It's Celestial Hacker Girl Jessica. It is a marble platformer.
Is your love of physics puzzles inspired by the block puzzles in Soul Reaver?
No, but I kind of want to now. Because I'm thinking about the ones where you have to, like, rotate blocks to fill in a picture, and I was like, I actually really liked those ones. Yeah, and then I was thinking, it's like, well, what if the game was mostly block puzzles, and when you killed your brothers, instead of getting magic powers, you just got better block skills?
That's kind of how the gummy ship worked in Kingdom Hearts, and I got obsessed with that.
God, I love the gummy ship so much.
Well, the dialogue is, I think, like, if you're talking about cut content, I refuse to believe that people who wrote this dialogue would willingly cut anything.
Oh,
Because like every single line like has to be 3 times as long as it normally would, with as many adjectives as possible, verging on like Warhammer 40,000 levels, and in some cases exceeding that. No one is allowed to just say something.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's true or just a false memory I have, but I feel like when the game came out, it was like the first game I can think of that had like as much dialogue as it did. And I do remember on the back of the box, it was like over like 3 hours of dialogue or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But no, the actual like voice cast is amazing, because they're all like well-known voice actors who have done like video games and TV shows and stuff like that.
The guy who's Raziel he's Michael Bell, and he was in every single like Hasbro 80s show.
Yeah.
So he was like, I just keep hearing like Duke when he's talking from G.I. Joe. Like a golf
I think
version.
He's also in a lot of Blizzard games.
Yeah, he's extremely prolific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Sin, the Elder God, he was voiced by Tony J, who passed a while back, but he was like amazing.
Yeah.
One of the best voices ever.
Yeah. Water has neither heft nor lift. I don't even know where heft means, but I love it. So how about, for the purpose of giving me more material to work with, Richie, could you do like a quick sum up of Soul Reaver?
Okay. Or like where Soul Reaver came from, or like the story.
I don't give a fuck. Just make it
Okay.
listenable.
All right. Okay. Legacy of Kain was a PS1 game. I think it was ported to PC later. It is a top-down 2D kind of Zelda clone in which you play as a guy called Kain who dies, comes back as a vampire, wants to get revenge. You run around doing cool vampire things and sucking blood out of people telekinetically. At the end of Legacy of Kain, you are given the choice to either die or become like the evil master of this world. Then Soul Reaver comes out. Soul Reaver is an odd situation in which the game started out as a different game, which we'll get to later on. The company that was making it merged with the company who made Legacy of Kain, and then they made Soul Reaver like after this Soul Reaver thing started off as a game called Shifter, and then sort of after the fact, like instead of making it Shifter, they sort of made it into Legacy of Kain 2, but because it plays completely differently and started off as a different project, it's called Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver, and it is set like hundreds of years in the future, assuming that Kain takes the ending choice where he becomes the evil vampire lord of this world. So it plays differently, you're not playing as Kain, and it's a different kind of game. And it went through a very odd kind of nightmarish development cycle in which a lot of things were cut and shifted around and removed. People might be familiar with a sort of infamous train wreck game called Too Human. Too Human was the game that the company that made Legacy of Kain were working on at the time. And that had this really, really long, I think it was possibly over a decade, like development cycle where they just like all their resources were going toward Too Human, and it was just like dragging on and on. So they were not going to make Legacy of Kain 2, but this other company basically had this game that they could sort of make into kind of Legacy of Kain 2. And then, so like that, this is why like there's so much that was sort of cut and shifted around. What happens with Soul Reaver is that at the end of Soul Reaver, it doesn't really end. Basically, you get to this point where the game should end, and then you start getting like little cutscenes of like things that will happen in the future, these like flash forwards. And then Kain, who is the antagonist, basically says like, this isn't the end, and jumps into a portal. And then it essentially says to be continued. But the thing is, they later released Soul Reaver 2, in which it kind of wasn't actually continued. It was continued in the next game they released, which was called Legacy of Kain Defiance. Soul Reaver 2 is basically like to transition into Legacy of Kain Defiance, but it's an entire game. And it feels like if it came out now, it would be DLC.
That was a lot of information for 2 minutes, Richie.
Well, you can cut it up. So Shifter was a game that was, they said like it was kind of it was like a Paradise Lost riff where you played as a fallen angel. And the central ideas of it all ended up in Soul Reaver, the idea being that you were like an angel of death who harvested souls. And you had to shift between like the real world and this like hell version of it. And the main character of it looks exactly the same as Raziel. Yeah.
Yeah. Except with like more armor and stuff like that.
And this information only came out fairly recently, didn't it?
Yeah, it looks like there was more information in like 2012.
Yeah.
Like the concept art was out forever ago. There was a bunch of information throughout the early 2000s about it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they talked about in the interviews I read is that Shifter was meant to be quite a small game. And then when it became Legacy of Kain, adjacent, then it's sort of like, well, now it has to be more significant. It has to be larger in scope. So they sort of like stretched it.
Yeah, way too far.
Yeah. Like, I think we should mention that a lot of stuff was cut for basically just like dev time reasons. It wasn't a case of like they didn't think it would work. And like it might not seem that way if you play it now, but this was a very technically like ambitious game when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that they made an enormous deal out of the fact that there's no loading times in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the map is really fascinating in the game. There's a lot of twisting corridors between areas to like obfuscate the zones loading in and out. Like there are basically no straight hallways in this universe. Everything is a curve or a spiral staircase or something to load things in and out. And it was like really impressive technology at the time. On top of all the like dialogue and cutscenes.
Yeah. Because like this came out, and I remember the thing it was being compared to was Tomb Raider, because it's a similar sort of like exploration action game. And like the most recent Tomb Raider at the time, like that had gigantic load times that it masked by playing FMVs that you couldn't skip. Whereas this was like you could actually just walk from one end of the game to the other without any loading time. And like that was a big deal for PS1 because like that had some pretty like massive load times for its 3D games.
Well, that's a pretty big deal for PS3 if you play Skyrim or Fallout.
Throwing some shade. Usually I'm the one who throws shade at Bethesda. It's got into you. You like them.
No, okay, well, you know what, though? I appreciate the long loading screens, and I started appreciating them after playing Fallout New Vegas on PC, because usually when I go through a door in Fallout or when I enter a room or a building, I'm like, oh, I'm going in a building. All right, well, I can go grab a coffee, go on Reddit, read an article, come back, and, it's almost loaded. But now it's like, I feel like I have no time to relax when I play Fallout because it's like, oh, I'm entering a building. As I enter, I'm about to go grab a coffee, but I'm already in the building. And it's like, oh no, I guess I gotta keep playing now.
You'll love Sonic 2006 if you ever play that.
Oh yeah?
That has loading times for every single NPC interaction.
Excellent.
Yeah, so like as we were saying, I don't know how much of this is going to stay in. So like anyway, the company that made hang on, I get confused about who is who here. Okay, Legacy of Kain was a company called Crystal Dynamics. And then the company that made yeah, Christ. Okay, let's start again. This is like trying to explain Sekiro, and I kept getting Genichiro and Ishin confused because they had an it sound in their name.
Right.
Okay. So the original Blood Omen was made by a company called Silicon Knights. And this shifter concept was from a company called Crystal Dynamics. And then Crystal Dynamics acquired the rights to the Legacy of Kain license. And then that's why Shifter ended up becoming Soul Reaver and the scope ended up changing. And this is at the time, as we were saying, that Silicon Knights were working on 2 Human, which like used up all of their resources. So like from what I read, that Silicon Knights weren't planning on making a Legacy of Kain sequel because they were too busy with 2 Human. And yeah, a lot of Soul Reaver ended up being removed due to like, because as we were saying, it was quite technically ambitious. There just wasn't time to finish it to the level that like they wanted to. So at the end of Soul Reaver, Raziel confronts Kain in this sort of weird like time vortex area, and you see like flash forwards of things that like are going to happen in the future, but then the game just ends. And it basically says to be continued. And it turns out that all the stuff that you see in those flash forwards and all the sort of like dangling plot threads in Soul Reaver, they're things that they did want to put in the game and they did want it to have a definitive ending. but there wasn't time. So they sort of like said, okay, to be continued, we'll do this in Soul Reaver 2. And then they didn't do it in Soul Reaver 2.
Yeah, they conceived a elaborate time travel, like, God, what, like a paradox, like?
Yeah, the
Like, Raziel is a paradox.
Wait, no, I know a quote.
Yeah, okay.
Wait.
Okay. Seems the new Elder God.
Yeah, okay. So my favorite quote from Soul Reaver is, "History abhors a paradox."
I remember, I don't know if it's in Soul Reaver, I think it's in one of the later ones, Kain gives this speech about how he's creating time paradoxes, and it's like, if you flip a coin enough times, eventually it will land on its edge instead of giving you heads or tails, and that's his plan.
Oh man, that's deep.
Is it?
I think that's his confrontation in Soul Reaver 2.
Yeah. So, for reference, Soul Reaver 2 resolves nothing from the original Soul Reaver.
Soul Reaver 2 basically undoes the original Soul Reaver.
One of the stock like shitty gaming webcomic jokes in the 2000s was like, wait a minute, why does Mega Man lose all of his abilities in between the games? This doesn't make sense. I'm funny. Soul Reaver 2 is why you don't do that. Because Soul Reaver 2 picks up immediately after the end of Soul Reaver 1, so you have all of the abilities from Soul Reaver 1 and all the bosses are dead. So you basically just go from one end of Nosgoth to the other solving block puzzles. And then
you fight the same demon over and over again.
Yeah, there's like, no exaggeration, I think there's like 4 different enemies in Soul Reaver 2, just over and over again.
There's a red demon, a green demon.
There's like a human with stick and then dog, and I think that's the whole game. And I remember picking it up and being like, yeah, it's a bit where you finally meet an actual vampire. It's one of the guys from the original Blood Omen who's full on like, I want to suck your blood kind of vampire. But they just have a debate about morality and Raziel leaves. Like,
a majority of that game is just Raziel talking to all the major antagonists. They never fight.
Yeah.
I've never played it because I never had a PlayStation 2. I just like read the synopsises and whatever. But this sounds like my ideal game. I need to play it as soon as possible.
But it's all block puzzles.
No, but there's a lot of talking.
There's a lot of talking.
I think the intro cutscene is like 50 minutes.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
And it's unskippable.
Yeah, you cannot skip. Not only can you not skip cutscenes, it just pauses them. And then there's an option to watch them again.
So if you accidentally press it.
Oh. And like, but as we were saying, like, it's got a very good cast, and they do keep the same cast throughout the series.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's largely tolerable because of that.
Okay.
Because they're professionals. They can kind of make anything sound good.
Yeah, so Soul Reaver 2 undoes a lot of the first game, but as Richard was saying, all of the things that you saw at the end of Soul Reaver were things that were supposed to happen. I believe there was like some information on like how those things were actually supposed to progress as well.
Yeah.
And they do allude to some of it in the later games, but it is like largely irrelevant. Because it's like you were supposed to kill this like ghost lady.
Yeah.
You were supposed to kill Kain. Like, I don't know how they were, like, what the actual planned ending of that was supposed to be. I have no idea. But it's
they said what it was.
Oh, really?
The ending was you were going to try to kill Kain and you couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So then, like, Raziel's gimmick is he has this like energy blade in his arm that absorbs things when he like stabs them. So in order to kill Kain, you were going to use that blade on this character who's basically like the Firekeeper equivalent, who's like the sort of NPC tells you what to do. You would absorb her into that. That would make you strong enough to kill Kain. Then you would use the blade to kill Kain. You would absorb Kain, and you would get the like super edgy, like black and red, like burning version. And then you would use that. One of the levels, which I guess we'll get to, there's one of the incredibly goth levels, and this is a gigantic pipe organ.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love that level so much.
Yeah, in the game when you go in there, Raziel comments that like this organ was designed to like drive off vampires with the sound it makes. So you were going to go back there, and you were going to like something involving like Kain's soul would allow you to operate the organ, and then that
like,
would send
kill all of the vampires.
it would send out this like huge blast of energy that would like kill off all the vampires, and that would be the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, like, that's mean, though. That sounds like a very bad ending. You're just killing all the vampires.
True.
Yeah, but in this game, the vampires are framed as having destroyed the planet.
So they're basically humans.
Meow. But yes, correct.
Yeah, because there's like the one human city kind of in the northern area of the map.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't attack them, they won't attack you if they like see you kill a vampire.
Yeah. There's a confrontation early on where, like, at the very beginning of the game, you see vampires fighting a human. And then if you let the human escape, the humans will not attack you from then on. But if you attack the human, you can attack the human and take his soul as just like a power-up. And if you do that, then the humans turn on. The way that like they explain it, it's actually very similar to Dark Souls. In that, like, because things cannot die, the world has started to stagnate. That's like the deal is that, like, because Kain is a vampire and things are undead now, nothing is dying, so like the sort of cycle of life and death has halted, and that's why the land is all decaying. So by getting rid of the vampires, it's like ending the Age of Fire in Dark Souls, kind of.
Did you know I have a note that says Soul Reaver is kind of like Dark Souls because the cycle of birth and death becomes stagnant because of Kain, just like Gwen. And you mention it. OMG.
Yeah. Well, it's like Dark Souls with the chicken and egg reversed. Because like in Dark Souls, it's like the world has begun to die, so things are becoming undead. Whereas in Legacy of Kain, it's because things are becoming undead, the world has begun to die.
Whoa. But I had a feeling that, and I actually mentioned it in a playthrough, that Dark Souls is actually a Soul Reaver-like because of the lore and the difficulty, and now it's basically confirmed.
What about the block puzzles?
That's what Souls is missing.
Exactly.
Miyazaki couldn't rip off the block puzzles because it would make it too obvious.
That's why he included a puzzle where you have to go into a swamp and use part of a tree to have a 1/3 chance of turning into a sort of color-inverted version of Casper, and then go back in and stand in front of a specific tile on a wall, and that makes a ladder come down. And the ladder helps you solve Patch's plotline.
What?
I see Autumn is unfamiliar with the Ring City.
I have not played the Ring City.
That's amazing.
Well, we just gave you the answer to one of the many fiendish puzzles.
That is not an answer.
Do you want to start with like Turel?
Okay.
Okay.
Autumn, do you want to start with Turel?
No.
Okay, I'll start with Turel. So, Raziel is one of Kain's vampire lieutenants. Kain has, is it 5? It's 5, I think. 5 including Raziel.
Yeah, because there's 7 pillars. Right?
I think. Hang on. There's blob guy, big guy, spider guy, fish guy, cut guy, and then Raziel, and then Kain to that 7.
Yeah. Milkaya, Zephon, Rahab,
Yeah.
Duma,
Yeah.
Turel,
Yeah.
Raziel.
Yeah.
I love their names so
Yeah.
much. They're so cool.
Yeah, they're all named after angels.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like left over from when it was the Fallen Angel game.
Oh, damn. I knew Raziel was an angel. I didn't know the rest of them were.
I think Rahab is a demon.
Oh, wow. I'll cut that out. I don't want to appear too stupid in front of Autumn.
That doesn't even make any sense. You cutting it out of the audio doesn't cut it out of my memory.
To be fair, Sin does forget things, like after we've recorded them. So she might think that you work like her, and if it's just not in the recording,
Yeah.
you won't remember it.
There we go.
So Kain creates the 6. He creates 6 lieutenants. You see them at the beginning,
Uh-huh.
and then the plot loosely of Soul Reaver is you basically killing your 5 like brothers as you progress through the game.
And absorbing their powers.
Yeah. They each get a different power, and you end up absorbing their powers as you play through it.
Yeah, once you absorb their souls, kind of like in Dark.
Yeah. However, one of them you never encounter, who's called Turel, and you see him in the opening movie. You hear about him in the game. You meet his like clan. They're called like the Turelim.
Mm-hmm.
And but Turel himself never actually appears.
And it's kind of disappointing a little bit because Turel was one of the people who threw you down the abyss. It was him and
Yeah.
I think. So it would have been satisfying to kick his butt,
Yeah, exactly. So it's building to this confrontation with this guy who you never meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another reason it's a Souls-like.
Oh, damn. Shade.
And Turel's like fortress is also visible in the FMVs. You can see this massive sort of fortress with giant like chimneys coming out the top.
Mm-hmm.
But you never go there.
He actually had a character model and dialogue in the game before they cut it.
Yeah.
I think there was early footage of his area in one of the like prototypes, but I don't
Yeah.
think it was ever finished.
There's screenshots of it on the box, but it never never actually shows up. Yeah.
I think one of the prototypes of his area was like lava or something.
Yeah. It's like Turel, he got recycled into a mini boss who's meant to be like a more powerful version of someone from Turel's clan.
Yeah.
But he's not actually Turel, and that's where like the dialogue ended up being used for him.
Yeah. I kind of remember this confrontation because when I played the game, whatever, I'm like walking around and then some guy's like, "Hey, Raziel." And I'm like, "Who the F are you? Shut up." And I just throw him off the ledge. And then all of a sudden I get a power and I'm like, wait, was this guy like important? What's going on?
I think you should have written the script for Soul Reaver. Hey, Raziel. Because I'm sure in the game it's like, what apostate heresy is this, you sepulchral fiend, or something like that.
Is there ever any like explanation offered in the game as to why you never actually make it to that area? I don't even remember where it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's like it was connected to the idea was that it was this big like almost like a factory, like this big steampunk sort of factory fortress that was billowing smoke. And the way you would have got to what they wanted to be the ending is you would have used Raziel's wings to glide up on like the updraft from the smokestacks.
Mhm.
And then that would have accessed the final area. Like it would have been above that. But like that and the final area both got removed. And yeah, Turel's like I haven't played it, but I read about it. Turel's corpse comes back as like a thing in, I think, Defiance.
I think you actually fight him in Defiance.
It's something like because one of the big things in Soul Reaver is like people's souls getting separated from their bodies. So like from as I understand it, having not played Defiance, Turel's corpse is like his soul is separated from his corpse, and his corpse is like worshipped as a god by this cult. And then you have to like reunite his soul with his body to like revive him and then kill him again. Something like that.
Do you also kill him in Soul Reaver 2 as a human?
You don't kill any. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. Soul Reaver 2 has the scene where you fight the pre-vampire versions of your you and your brothers.
And they're worthless.
Yes.
They can't do anything to you.
Oh, but we didn't talk about that, so spoilers. Because Kain's lieutenants were actually vampire slayers before Kain turned them into his lieutenants. Ooh.
Yes. They were all like knights in the like human army that in Soul Reaver 2 you discover were killing all of the, at the time, I guess, semi-innocent vampires. Soul Reaver 2 is weird. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, but it just turns out that Kain's lieutenants were actually like Seraphon warriors or whatever.
Yeah, and they were also jerks. Yeah. So Raziel is like, actually, I'm going to kill you all because you lied to me. Everyone just lies to Raziel throughout the whole series. That is kind of the like running gag. Everyone is lying to Raziel except for Kain, and everyone else. So it's just like Raziel thinks Kain is his enemy, but he's like, no.
Do you think that's why he's such a relatable character? Because he's just like a disaster. Everything's going horribly wrong for him all the time. Just the one time something goes right, he gets hideously disfigured and thrown in a pit.
Oh no!
I'm looking at the Legacy of Kain wiki now, and it is like levels of time travel and soul switching that I cannot comprehend.
I have tried so many times to wrap my head around the time travel bullshit in Soul Reaver 2, and I cannot do it. Soul Reaver 2 is just a plot vehicle to retcon everything from Soul Reaver 1.
Yeah.
Richie, what are you looking for?
I'm trying to figure out what the deal with Turel's corpse being worshipped by a cult was. And because the Legacy of Kain wiki is so confusing, it's like, here's a bunch of like, what does any of this mean?
Well, what I
When
read...
exploring Avernus Cathedral and the Hell Dungeon in the Azimuth, Kain stumbled upon an altar dedicated to the worship of Hashigik.
Yeah, Richie, what I'm trying to tell you is that in Blood Omen, the first one, there was a being that was worshipped.
Yeah.
Like by a cult or whatever. But then they like retconned it so that that being turns out to be Turel.
So Turel's in Legacy of Kain, the first one?
Basically.
Isn't he not alive? Do they go back in time? Is this how other people feel when we talk about Bloodborne? Oh yeah, no, it says here that after the reason Turel's not in Soul Reaver is someone called Azimuth sends him back in time to the original Blood Omen. Of course.
Oh. I do vaguely remember that now.
Good. Finally.
Turel's designs look pretty sweet, though.
Yeah. Yeah, all the all the vampire lieutenants evolve into like a different sort of monster, and Turel's like. Actually, he's not the big strong guy. Doom is the big strong guy. Turel's like the shouty one.
Did you call him Doom? It's Duma.
Yeah, I think Turel was supposed to be like, or Turel was supposed to be like
yeah,
that type thing. So it's
because you get the screaming power in the game, but you get it from just like one of the Turel vampires, not actually Turel. The one who says, "Hey, Raziel." Yeah. Hey, Raziel.
Hey, Raziel.
Get over here, Raziel. Oh, hang on. I just found out the reason they cut Turel is they couldn't get Gilbert Gottfried to voice him. Hey, Raziel! Get over here!
Wow, that waveform does not look happy.
Oh my god, I just got an idea.
Oh no.
Oh my god, Autumn, Rich's opinion doesn't matter, but you tell me what you think. We get Richie to revoice the entirety of Soul Reaver dialogues.
It's 3 hours long.
All the scripts are online, and I did look it up. This vampire doesn't say, "Hey, Raziel." They say, "Heretic, you shall not pass." And then Raziel says, "Such loyalty to..." Or wait, maybe I can do a Raziel voice. No, I can't. Such loyalty to one who has you... Wow, this dialogue is the worst. Oh, yeah. Such loyalty to one who has you guarding this outpost like a chained dog. Do you prosper on the scraps he casts you? And then the vampire says, your insults will... Well, it's Gilbert Godfrey, right? So it's like, your insults will do nothing to blunt the agonies of your demise.
Your insults will do nothing!
This is awful audio. I'm sorry to the people who may or may not listen to this if it gets left in.
Oh, it will. We'll record something, then 2 weeks later someone will message me with, "Wow, I can't believe she left blank in," and I'm like, oh no. I think the worst was, like, I just started getting messages about Tim Allen. I was like, what? And then I realized we had gone on a tangent about home improvement. And apparently you'd left the entire thing in a discussion of something from Bloodborne.
No, okay, this is not what happened. Autumn, Rich is not telling it correct. It was an episode we recorded to go on Patreon because I had an idea for a podcast. We never went through with it. So we had like 2 or 3 random episodes. And I was like, I don't know what to do with these things. Do I put them on Patreon? Do I put them on YouTube? And then I was like, I asked people who watch, like, do you want me to put this on YouTube or do I store it away on Patreon? And there was a vote. And like 95% of people said, put it on YouTube. And I did. And it is what it is.
Yeah. Autumn, if you enjoyed this look behind the scenes into what every single podcast is like before it's edited.
Yes, of course.
So, Terrell, anything else about Terrell?
I don't think so. I mean, you kill him in Defiance. He's apparently retconned into Blood Omen 1.
I didn't realize until I rewatched the opening that like all of the lieutenants actually had different like faces in the intro.
Yeah.
Because you don't see them for very long. Yeah, and I assumed it was just the same model with different colored capes. But no, they have different faces and they all kind of like hint at what they will eventually turn into. So you can see that like Rahab, who becomes this like eel monster, he's got like his skin is kind of bluish and he looks like he has gills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like the Malachiah, who turns into like slime, he's sort of like, he looks like kind of bloated, like his like flesh is sort of like sticking through what he's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like a lot of detail went into this thing that you barely see.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because, like you say, it's detailed that you
Yeah.
don't really pay attention to until you know what's going to happen and what evolution they're going to, go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lore-wise, it's supposed to be that, like, Kain evolves something first and then
Mm-hmm.
picks one of the others to evolve that trait, so
Mm.
they kind of diverge. And that's why Raziel is myrtled, because
Yeah.
he got the wings.
Yeah, he was showboating.
Well, he was actually told to evolve first.
Yeah, Raziel was like second behind Kain.
Yeah, it's like he was the second, like in command. And so they were like, "Oh, well, you're cool and you can evolve." And then they were like, "Oh, but not that. I'm jealous." And then throw you into a cliff.
Throw you into a cliff where you meet a giant like octopus tree voiced by Tony J.
Mm-hmm. That I guess has tentacles that just like permeate the entire world.
It is a good design. I do like the Elder God, because you have no idea what it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we ever find out?
No.
No.
But you did mention that it reminds you of Cthulhu.
It's basically just a big mass of tentacles that sort of looks like a tree and eyes sticking out of it, but it's not clear like exactly how big it is and how far the tentacles go.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to always be underwater.
But its voice is always with you. Is it Odin?
Its voice is with you, except in at the end of Soul Reaver 2 when he's like, "You are going, I cannot follow you." And then you meet some like, is it Mobius the Time Streamer? One of the many NPCs that like has half an hour of dialogue and I didn't understand what they did. In that sense, it's like the anti Souls, because in Souls there'll be like a character with one line, and then you'll discover they were massively important.
Yeah, in the Soul Reaver games, you can talk to someone for literally hours, and they're totally useless.
Or they'll appear to be useless, and someone was like, "That fool, I misled him," and it's like, oh. You're lost in a maze of moral relativism.
Did somebody say that?
Raziel says that when he meets Kain at the end. They have an argument. Like, it's like in any other game, it would just be like, "I found out that I used to be a vampire hunting knight, and then you resurrected me as a vampire. I'm going to kill you now." And there'd be like one line in response to that. They have this debate that goes forever, that just ends with Raziel saying, like, "There's too much moral relativism in what you're saying." It's so ridiculous.
I love that, though. Soul Reaver 2 is like the most anticlimactic follow-up to like one of the most epic attempts at a game ever, and it's beautiful.
It's Raziel getting elemental weapons but nothing to use them on. Oh, we can talk about the elemental reavers that got cut.
Okay, let's do that.
It's like you were going to get elemental upgrades to the reaver like sword thing that you have, and they ended up, you get, I think, one.
You get the fire one,
because one of the mechanics is that like vampires can only be killed if you burn them or impale them. So when you get the fire one, you can just straight up kill the vampires. You don't have to worry about figuring out like a means of disposing of the body. Happily, they eventually brought the elemental weapons back in Soul Reaver 2, the game in which everyone's dead, so there's nothing to fight. So you just wander around getting elemental upgrades and then using them to solve block puzzles.
I appreciate that because it parallels real life. Because like sometimes you buy like a dress or some jewelry or some shoes, but you won't necessarily wear it to an event because there are no events to go to, but you still buy it just in case.
Yeah, a lot of the Reavers are actually still in the game code because I think you can use the debug mode to enable them, but they don't do anything special. And according to the list on the website, they were the Sunlight Reaver, which sounds cute, the Water Reaver, Stone Reaver, Fire you actually get, Sound, Spirit, and Amplified.
Praise the Sunlight Reaver!
I believe the Spirit one is the one that you were supposed to get from killing the ghost.
Ariel.
And the Amplified one is what you were
Yeah.
supposed to get from killing Kain.
Mm-hmm.
And there are forges for some reason in the world that you stick your arm in and it comes out magic.
Yeah, very forward thinking.
The fire one still exists in the game. And I think the sound, is it the sound or the sunlight one that is still in the game but not functional? I don't remember which, but yeah, I don't think there was anything for like the Earth Reaver or anything like that, but and like the water temple in the game, I think has a room that looks like it could have been a forge but got repurposed in this else.
Yeah.
But those would have all had like different special effects.
Yeah. There's like glyphs as well that function kind of like magic.
Mm-hmm.
And they follow a similar like convention. There's like sunlight and fire and water and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were supposed to have like all the Reavers were supposed to correspond to all the glyphs.
Mm-hmm. That would make sense. But yeah, after you use the Fire Reaver, or after you use the Fire Forge, you get the Fire Reaver, which is your sword thing, which I guess we also never really explained, but that's fine. But then it's interesting because you can also have like a torch as a weapon. That's like a one-time use thing. But your arm is the same way, where it's like if you stick it in a fire, it gets the fire abilities. But if you like go into the water or into the spirit realm, you lose it, I think.
I think so.
And I think in Soul Reaver 2, you can just swap between them at will, right? They like kind of abandoned the like you have to stick your arm in things mechanic, but I thought that was really interesting actually.
Yeah.
And you get an absurd amount of like elemental reavers.
Is Defiance the one where you like switch between Kain and Raziel?
Yes. And Kain also gets elemental reavers, but his are like the balance seals. So he gets like the Reaver of Space and the Reaver of Time and basically just turns into like Soul Thanos or whatever.
Some of the stuff that was removed was in the Soul Reaver comic that they released to promote the game, because that was based on like an earlier version. Yeah, to promote Soul Reaver, they made a Soul Reaver comic, and it's written based on like an earlier script because it had to be out at the same time as the game. So that has like it has a cut villain called the Priestess in it. The Priestess was going to be in the human, like the human sort of like citadel place where they were all hiding. There was going to be like a vampire worshipping cult that was like operating underground there, led by a priestess. And the priestess, I think her dialogue is still around as well. And if Raziel got her soul, he would have been able to possess enemies. Mechanic later stolen by Sekiro. I'm looking at the comic now. It is extremely 90s.
Oh yeah? Send us a picture.
Wow, that is extremely 90s.
Oh, this is beautiful. Is this Raziel?
I don't think so. I think it's just a vampire.
But doesn't it have like Raziel's mark on it?
Oh, it might be. I'm just flicking through, and then there's like an ad for Tomb Raider in the middle of it, which is also very 90s. It just says hot chick with big guns.
Wow, that's a lot.
Have either of you played Gex 3D?
No.
No.
I'm almost certain Soul Reaver is using the same engine, because it was by the same company.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Gex, Sin?
I don't know what that is.
Gex is the mascot video game character he's as annoying as people claim Bubsy was. Because once they got access to CD technology, he just never shut the fuck up. He was a sassy gecko who watched TV all the time and would quote TV shows while you were playing. It is insufferable if you ever sit down and actually listen to it.
Okay.
So you'll be playing the level and he'll be like, at least it beats being at the DMV.
Wow.
And lots of Austin Powers quotes, just with no context. He'll just say them. He'll collect a power up and he'll be like, Shagadelic, baby! It's like, yep. If it was funny the first time, it will be funny every time. I hate Gex so much. But I'm pretty sure it's using the same engine. It animates the same. It like has the same feel to it.
Have you tried Googling it to answer your question?
What am I Googling?
If they're using the same engine.
Fine, let's see. Does Soul Reaver use the same engine as Gex 3D? Yes. It's literally called the Gex engine.
What? What?
The engine Soul Reaver uses is literally called the Gex engine.
Aren't you happy I helped you solve the biggest mystery of your life today?
Yes.
You're welcome.
Oh, here we are. List of quotes and one-liners said by Gex. Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. Upon hitting enemies with his tail. Now that's what I call getting some tail. Do you think that, like, Gex and Soul Reaver's dialogue represent the duality of man? One is this massively overwritten, like, monologues about the nature of morality, and the other is, I don't even know which of these Gex quotes to read because they're all awful. Oh, hang on. Upon collecting ice power up. This is colder than my ex-wife.
I just heard Tiffany laugh in the other room from that.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hello, Tiffany.
Upon taking damage. Sorry, I only cry at weddings.
So if Soul Reaver and Gex are two sides of the same coin, what happens if they land on Edge?
Oh.
Is that the Gilbert Godfrey voiced, written by Sin version?
Upon leaving character idle. What smells like socks? Upon using TV bomb. That's for 12 years of Full House.
Ooh.
Jesus Christ.
So we talked about the elemental reavers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there was a shifting at will ability.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you guys talk about that?
Yeah. You're supposed to be able to get shift at will at what is currently the end of the game. So like instead of going back in time, you would have gotten the power to shift at will. And I guess that would have allowed you to solve some sort of platforming puzzle to get to the final world or whatever.
Hmm?
We should explain that, like, by shifting, this is like kind of like Zelda 3, where you had like a light world and a dark world, and they were sort of like mirrors of each other, but not exactly the same. So there would be situations where you'd have to like shift into one world, solve a puzzle, and then shift back again in order to make progress. And the way it works in Soul Reaver is that you can at any point shift out of like the material world into the spiritual world. But when you're in the spiritual world, you need to find like a portal kind of thing to get back to the material world. Which is that's actually like really similar to Zelda 3, where like you need to find specific portals to get into the dark world, but you also have an item that sends you back to the light world at any time. And shift at will would have allowed you to change what world you were in, like without worrying about portals, basically. And I guess like an example of what we mean is like we were talking earlier about the giant kind of goth organ. A lot of the puzzles in that area involve like if you're in the material world, it just looks like an organ, but if you're in the spirit world, the organ's pipes or like bend in these sort of like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari patterns. So you need to like keep shifting to climb up the organ. Because every time you shift worlds, the position of the pipes will change. Yeah.
You know about the shifting worlds? I remember when I first played Soul Reaver, and I got to a point in the game, it was in the very beginning, where I was just stuck. Like I was walking around and I tried everything and I was stuck and I couldn't progress. And I was like, this game is so dumb. Like I'm stuck. Why am I stuck? Oh. And so you guys remember, I think it was called Cheat Planet. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Is this like game FAQs before game FAQs was the dominant one?
I think so, because whenever I wanted like big head codes for games or like infinite health codes or walkthroughs, I would go to Cheat Planet. And so I went on there and I downloaded like an entire thick walkthrough of Soul Reaver. Like somebody typed it all out, and like I was reading through it, and then when it got to the part where I was at, the walkthrough was like, okay, now you're going to reach a dead end. So you got to shift. It's going to change the environment, and so you'll be able to progress. And I was like, what? And I did it, and it worked, and I was able to progress, and that just blew my mind. And it was like, oh my god, this game is amazing. So then I like understood that you're going to have to use your shifting ability to be able to like progress in a game when you get stuck. So there are going to be puzzles and stuff. And I was like so amazed, and I fell in love with the game instantly.
Upon entering level, this place is weirder than the 4th of July at Rick James' place. I'm still on the Gex wiki.
So I think that's the majority of the like important cut content. There's a bunch of like minor things that changed throughout development because there's a lot of like betas and like code leaks and things like that from early on in development, which is cool because they clearly had to like scale back a lot because I think early on there were like way more like trails and particle effects and things like that, but I think it was probably causing frame rate issues would be my guess.
Yeah. Like we said, it was extremely technically like pushing the limits of what you could do. Yeah. Because, like, there's a reason that, like, the Nintendo 64 had Mario 64 initially, and then the PS1 had, like, Crash Bandicoot, which is basically a straight line. Because the PS1 was not especially great at gigantic 3D environments. It took a very long time for them to get that right. Yeah, and Soul Reaver was, I think, like, probably I'm sure there'll like be some, but, like, this was pretty, like, top of the, like, you know, as far as you could push it, I think. Because this is like just prior to PS2. It's like late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I think like Kingsfield was also a giant 3D space, but that's mostly just tunnels, whereas this was like open air. Yeah.
Yeah. Kingsfield
Yeah.
had a lot simpler geometry and lower resolution
Also no loading
textures, so
times in Kingsfield.
streaming that was a lot easier.
Yeah, I was playing it last night.
Draw distance was garbage.
I was playing it last night while listening to the Soul Reaver cutscene compilation and attempting to understand what happened in it.
Yeah, I think one of the deleted things is just a gun. Like, there's a screenshot of, like, Raziel holding a gun, and it's, like, amazing.
There's a very long thread on NeoGAF that's, like, listing all the stuff that was cut. I'm just going through it. Now, there's a lot of concept art of, like, it looks a lot more steampunk. There's lots of just, like, big pipes and bellows and cogs everywhere.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing that was cut, I think, was like, I think it's because that area was cut, was the fog that protected the vampires from the sun.
Oh, the smoke. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that's what the last level was supposed to be, was the factory that just does nothing but produce smoke to protect the vampires.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a cool concept. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's also the backstory of the Matrix.
Whoa!
And it came out the same year.
Oh my god. So Matrix is the Soul Reaver like?
I think it's safe to say it is.
Okay.
It's as talkative.
Why?
You know, the character's sitting around talking about, like, what is real and, like, quoting Baudrillard and things.
Yeah, just having a lot of existential crises.
Yeah, I don't remember. I just remember, like, pew, 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 dodge the bullet.
It was shot in Sydney, so I had fun picking locations and recognizing local actors. Like, that's Damo from Home and Away. What's he doing here?
No one understands that reference.
That's okay. I don't think anyone even remotely older or younger than me remembers Damo.
Australians probably do.
Leave a comment if you remember Damo from Home and Away.
Well, write in if you do.
Who was Mouse in the Matrix, and then he was the guy in Attack of the Clones who says, "Do you want to buy some death sticks?" One day we'll do an episode that's just me going over, like, Hollywood movies that were shot mostly in Australia and pointing out all the, like, local soap opera actors who showed up in them. Yeah, I'm looking at the concept art. There's these, like, female vampires that look very, like, Hellraiser kind of thing. They've got, like, parts of their skin sort of torn off and stretched.
Mm.
Yeah, there's, like, a lot of steampunk goggles in this as well.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that in Soul Reaver 2, I think.
Oh yeah, the skin that they would have used for Turel's model is available. Yeah, and he does look like a giant bat. He's got, like, big swept back ears.
Right.
Oh yeah, the sound that the organ makes is called the Hymn of Death. And that was going to kill off all the vampires.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you think Raziel will be referenced in the new Vampire the Masquerade game?
Did they have any relation?
Maybe Soul Reaver is a game in that world.
Maybe this is the game that happens when the coin lands on its edge.
When it lands on its edge, just the Soul Reaver games don't happen, and we just have Vampire the Masquerade.
I feel like Autumn is in awe, like, how much dumber can this get?
Well, she's about to find out. There's lots of art of smoldering, sexy, burned to death in a pit Raziel in this. He has a pair of pants that come up to slightly below his armpits, but then it's split all the way down to his crotch.
What are you talking about?
Tetsuya Nomura, take note.
Those are such good pants.
I'm looking at them now. Yeah, I never noticed that before. But it's true. Oh my god.
And he's got that really bad haircut of like side parted bangs and then a ponytail.
Yeah.
I'm looking at some concept art and there's like a zoomed in detail of his pants and crotch. They really wanted to make sure that that was like rendered correctly.
For the 10 seconds it's visible.
And then Katamari Damacy shows up and they're like, I'll show you what a well-rendered crotch area looks like.
Oh my god, Kain has the same pants. When he's on the throne.
Way.
Yeah, he has the same pants and his legs are really far apart and there's quite a prominent bulge. I guess this is like the vampire uniform. Kain commissioned someone to make a uniform where it's just incredibly high-waisted pants that don't zip up.
What if Raziel showed up wearing the same pants as Kain?
Oh, that's why.
And that's why Kain was.
Oh, you'll notice actually that the pants are completely destroyed when he's thrown in the Well of Eternity. So maybe that was the plan. They're the only part of his costume that's ruined. Curse that Raziel and his high-waisted pants. I also like to point out that the pants at the back, there's an extra thing that goes down that covers where they don't join. So the the ab to crotch window is added deliberately. That is just there to look hot.
Also, Kain has the most intense widow's peak ever.
He really does. But it's grown down to the point where it almost touches the top of his nose.
His brows go over the top of his hair. I don't understand his head.
He looks like he's growing horns. But also his eyes are part of the horns. I feel like it's gesturing toward this idea of the vampires as this incredibly vain aristocracy who will refuse to allow time to affect them, so they keep changing themselves. And now they're just plastic surgery disaster people. That's what Malachi is, isn't he? Because he's just a blob, but then he starts stitching together a suit out of people he thinks are attractive to wear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awfully prescient of Rahab to have fish on his design before he turned into a fish. Yep. We certainly learned a lot about Soul Reaver today.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Do you guys have anything else to add?
We've gone over everything I wrote down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Autumn, are you Team Raziel or are you Team Kain?
I guess you could say I like Kain, but they kind of just end up being on the same team eventually anyway.
Yeah.
Raziel got the fucking short end of the stick on that deal. So.
Doesn't it end with like Raziel disappears from existence, but his soul is like in Kain's sword or something like that?
So, if you want to get into that,
We may as well.
we skipped over this in explaining anything about the plot of Soul Reaver, but you don't start out the game with the Spectral Reaver. You get that because Kain breaks his sword on your head or whatever. And the soul that's inside the sword bonds with you. In Soul Reaver 2, you find out that the reason why the sword was broken a long time ago, and Raziel like touches it and mends it, and when he does that, like his soul becomes trapped inside the sword. And so Raziel is like a time loop of sword soul, which is why he has like so much power, because it's just like, because of the time travel thing, it's like he's like a feedback loop. But then at the end of the Defiance, he goes back into the sword. So now the sword has 2 Raziel souls in it.
Imagine pitching this story to the dev team. Okay, but then after he's in the sword, he goes back in time again. So now there's 2 versions of him in the sword, and everyone's like, oh, whoa.
But that gives the sword the power to kill the Elder God, which is what Kain sets off to do at the end of Defiance. And we will never get a resolution on that.
Yeah, because Tony J. is no longer with us.
So they tried to do like a reboot / sequel set like 1,000 years after like Kain fixed the universe, but that game never got off the ground.
Oh, it's too bad.
And it was like that character, the main character of that game was like a human, but he was like the reincarnation of Raziel's soul. So,
which soul? The one that's in the
one of them.
One of the 2 souls that's in the sword, or just another soul?
I don't know which one. Oh god. The other thing in Soul Reaver 2, I just remembered. The reason why... Oh god. So Raziel... I fucked it up. When Raziel fixes the sword, his soul was already in the sword. And the reason why his soul is already in the sword is because he went back in time and killed himself. And his soul... So, like, his human soul is inside the sword. And somehow when he gets turned into a vampire, he gets another vampire soul. Somehow. I don't know where vampire souls come from. Space, I guess. So he has 2 souls, but god, that game Soul Reaver 2 is so confusing and terrible. I hate it. And I love it.
Then at the end of Defiance, he kills or throws himself on the sword or whatever, so Kain can like make the world a better place. So he gets merged with the Soul Reaver again?
Yeah.
So it's like 3 souls?
Yeah. Well, no. Wait. When does Kain get the sword again? Wait. Yeah. Oh my god. Wait. There has to be like... Soul Reaver's so confusing. I don't remember when Defiance takes place. I think it takes place before the original Soul Reaver.
Isn't it about time travel? And like you go... It's like partially after and partially before Soul Reaver?
Because Soul Reaver 2 kind of changed the events of what happened. And then Defiance was like trying to like make Kain the only pillar guardian, because there's also the weird pillars, which are an awesome design idea and don't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
So I love the pillars. They're so weird.
Oh my god!
What?
Are the pillars in Bloodborne the pillars of Nosgoth?
What pillars?
Oh, the ones outside the Hunter's Dream.
They're a lot bigger in Bloodborne. But they kind of, before they break, they seem to just go off into infinity.
Oh, there you go. Theory confirmed?
Real. Not clickbait. Canon.
But yeah, there's also a bunch of like, there's like, not only is there the time travel stuff, but there's also like the aliens from the alternate dimension. There's the like weird prophecy where it's like Kain and Raziel are the same person, but like they don't seem like it, and it's so like obtuse and good.
Well, we don't have to resolve it all today because we are going to have more episodes.
Yeah. Those will just be teasers for further nonsense discussions about Gex and Star Wars.
Do you think someone can mod Soul Reaver so all the dialogue is replaced with dialogue from Gex?
Probably. I don't know why you would want to do that, but probably.
Okay, it's like it's Soul Reaver, but instead of Kain, it's Sonic, and then all of his lieutenants are different terrible mascots from the 90s. Raziel is Gex. And then, like, Bubsy, Awesome Possum, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel. I guess Rocky Rodent. He's pretty cool. I like Rocky Rodent. And Socket, the weird squirrel that connected to... No, Socket was like a weasel that had an electric plug for a tail. And then 500 years later, they've all metamorphosed into monstrosities, and you have to kill them. There's like a giant Bubsy flesh monster crawling around going, what could possibly go wrong?
Oh my god.
This is how all the podcasts end, by the way.